This Sunday we continue our series, How to Not Ruin Your Life, based on the book and some of the wisdom we get from the book of Proverbs. In case you missed our previous sermons, we're defining a proverb as a short, pithy piece of advice or knowledge. Short and pithy. A good example of that is something you read on a bumper sticker or on the bottom of a billboard. If you can't read it while you're driving by, it's too long. But there's some profound wisdom found in these Proverbs. They're written by the King Solomon, who's been touted as the wisest of all men in the Bible, even though, and we may get there depending on what some of the lessons we learn later in the series. He has some real interesting life choices later in life, but we'll probably get there. Today we'll be looking at something from the 18th chapter. It'll be verse 2. You can follow along if you can beat me there, but it's such a short thing, you might as well, I think, just follow along here. Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. I feel like based on our world today, I could probably just sit back down, and you already know where I'm going with this. I've had a lot of fun telling stories from my life or people that I know, but there's a story that I just could not ignore because in my lifetime, there's been the advent and popularization of this thing you might have heard of called the internet. In fact, some of you are watching the video in the future on the internet, so this is very meta for you. And this is so much wisdom. It's like King Solomon had a Facebook account with this one and some of the other stuff I'm going to share today. There's a story on Facebook that I just loved that I had to share. And it's not a personal story. It's not even a story of a friend or a loved one. But there was a picture of a famous musician in a band. I'm not going to share which because I don't want you to miss the point of what's going on here. But a famous guitar player. And on the back of his guitar, he was with his guitar, and the back was facing, and there was a crude statement about a politician. And there was a comment on this. It said, "Oh, great. Now musicians are all politicians. We get to listen to this musician's thought on politics. Why can't he just sit back and play guitar?" And the response is what I wanted to share with you guys because it reminds me of this proverb. And his response to this, and this is all, I'm reading this is all things that have happened in line. His response, the guitar player says, "One does not have to be an honors grad in political science from Harvard to recognize my point of view. But I happen to be an honors grad in political science from Harvard University, so I can confirm that for you." This is what we call a mic drop, where he just exits stage right. I like this story because it's an example of somebody who decided they knew enough about the other person to air their opinion. And in this example, they were caught out of bounds. They were caught with their pants down. It was the kind of thing that if they had taken a little bit of time, things might have gone differently in that conversation. Fools find no pleasure in understanding. Understanding is a direct response to listening. Listen up. That's today's theme. We understand when we listen. We understand when we acknowledge that somebody else has a story to tell. Now, I love this topic for this time and place because somehow we have lost that ability with the internet. So much of our life revolves around technology and correspondence in ways that are not face-to-face. I think it's hard face-to-face to dehumanize someone enough to not recognize that they're a human being and they have some story to tell. I think of times that I've had theological expressions that have been challenged. I go to a seminary that's a Presbyterian seminary, which means they're all Calvinists, which is okay. I grew up Presbyterian, but I'm not Presbyterian anymore. I've seen the error of my ways. And for all my classmates that are watching, you know what I'm talking about. But there are times in class, after class, around a lunch table maybe, that we have conversations and we differ on theological points. But the response I try to keep in my mind is, that's really interesting. Why do you feel that way? Because that opens the door to understand the story of the human being I'm talking to. Because that's what this is about. John Wesley, who's the founder of Methodism, said there are 4 points that we get our beliefs. He said the number 1 should be Scripture. And I think that's optimistic, because I think the actual is what he says next, which is personal experience. The things that we have done in our lives and the situations we've been in that have shaped what we believe about everything. And for religion, you can substitute politics, because that tends to be the objection du jour right now, the conflict of the day. Is what we believe and what we choose to share on Facebook or with one another. We like to argue, we like to air our opinions. Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. I have something to say, and it's going to be more important than what you're saying because it's my opinion and I know that it's right. This is like the internet in one sentence right there. That's what it's become, this shouting match. We've lost it. We've lost this understanding. My grandma would say, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You ever heard that? You have 2 ears and 1 mouth? The bad news is you have 10 fingers. So when you're typing, the math goes out the window. It doesn't work anymore. We have this thing where we turn off that part of our brain that acknowledges these are human beings. There are people in your life that disagree with you, and that's okay. Even in things where it's like faith issues, where we as Methodists believe that we are smarter than everyone else and what we believe is the right way, we leave a little bit of space to say that there's lots of things that you can disagree with and still sit in these pews. That's what we call the open table. You know, Christ died for all people, so all people can come and be a part of our Holy Communion, which is a good thing, and our Holy Baptism are two big sacraments. But we also say that we believe in Jesus Christ. We believe that he is the true Son of God, and if you don't believe that, then sorry, this is a kind of a sticking point for us. But when we have these conversations, it has to start with listening. Because if you don't understand, you cannot grow with a person. One of the things that I love is another response from Solomon in Proverbs. It says, even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. Sometimes we just get in trouble simply by opening our mouths. Mark Twain has a version of this where he says, I'd rather be kept silent and thought of a fool than open my mouth and confirm it. I think Solomon and Twain would have got along nicely. Wisdom can be in silence. And for Solomon, when he talks about fools and wise people, wisdom and folly, for him, these are the pinnacle of good and bad. To be wise is to be the best person you can be. You've reached the pinnacle of your belief and knowledge, and you're living it out. So when we talk about the wise can be silent. There's another adage. I feel like I'm adding lots of proverbs into my Proverbs talk here that aren't in the book. But the more I learn, the less I really know. Have you heard that one? Wisdom comes with acknowledging that opinions are opinions, facts are facts, And I don't know everything about everything. In fact, the more that I know about anything, the more I realize I don't know much about anything. We live in a time of divide. Nope. We live in a time where we are encouraged by all of these external forces to be the loudest voice in the room. Somehow that makes us right. We can just be louder than everyone else. We can shout, or we can be angrier than anyone else, or we can degrade the other person the most. If you don't believe me, turn on the TV tomorrow leading up to the election, and you tell me that it's not about degrading the other person. This is where we're at. And we as Christians have the opportunity, and I would say the responsibility, to lead the charge against this. There are plenty of things we need to get in line with and move forward with. This is not one of them. We should be leading the charge about understanding. This doesn't mean agreeing with. This doesn't mean that you are submitting to. What this means is you're willing to learn the story of another human being. Because I'll tell you this, if you understand the story that someone has to share, then you're in a better place to communicate with that person, to change their mind maybe, but even just to coexist and to love them as we are called to do. John 13, 34 and 35, and I'm going to paraphrase. We are called to love our neighbors in the same way that Jesus Christ loves us. And that should be so revolutionary, and I'll tell you what it would be if we did it. So revolutionary that simply by our actions, people would know we were Christians. We could treat people with the love and understanding and dignity of people who have divine worth. Because we all have divine worth. You were created in the image of God, and so is the person who's yelling at you. If we could acknowledge that and love one another, people would simply look at us and go, that person must be a Christian. And there's our witness. We as Christians should be leading the charge to be better. We should be listening, discussing, communicating, even disagreeing in love. And there's a way to do it, I promise you, because we don't agree on everything. I believe something different than you. The person on your right and the person on your left believes something different than you. But we all seem to love each other in this room. If we can do this outside these walls, the world becomes a better place. A fool's opinion is more important than the faith of the wise. Listen up. There's something worth listening to. In every conversation, there's more than what's being shouted. What type of person do you want to be? Do you want to live in wisdom? Or is your opinion going to turn you into a fool? Let us pray.